free will. What is it? It's our ability to make our own choices, to choose for ourselves what we want to happen. Not just every day, get up, take a shower, go to work, come home, eat dinner, go to bed. It's every decision we make. How we choose our friends, who we're going to marry, how many kids we want to try to have. Whether we want to follow God or not. But how does it work? I've always heard people say that God knows the future, right? He knows the future. I heard somebody say, has it ever occurred to you that nothing ever occurred to God? Fair. But for a long time, that concept, God knows the future, I couldn't reconcile it with the idea of free will. Like, if God knows the future, how could free will exist? If he knows what you're going to do, can you change your mind and do something else? Like, take Judas, the man who betrayed Jesus. Did God know he was going to betray Jesus? Of course he did. But when did he know? Did he know at the moment that Judas talked to the Pharisees and got the gold, or the silver, I mean? Did he know when Judas met Jesus that he would betray him? Did he know when Judas became an adult? Maybe farther back. Did God know that Judas would betray Jesus when he was a child? Farther than that. Did God know when he created Judas that Judas would betray Jesus and then go and hang himself and end up in hell? If God knew that Judas was going to do that, if God knew that Judas was going to end up in hell, then why did he create him? To go to hell? Does God create people knowing that they're going to choose to go to hell? I struggled with that for so long. But thinking about it, there had to be another way. There had to be something that made more sense than that. Because that doesn't sound like a loving God that would create people knowing they'll go to hell. I mean, he's essentially creating them with the express purpose of them going to hell. That doesn't work for me. However, a new way of thinking of it. This is me. This is me. This is how I see it. God doesn't just know the future. That's far too limiting. The future? No. Here's how I look at it. God knows every possible future. He knows every possible result of every possible choice we can ever make. He knows that if you end up marrying Sally, just a name used for example, no reference to anybody is implied. If you end up marrying Sally, he knows that you will have 2 kids with her, and they will grow up healthy and smart and successful. But he also knows that if you don't marry Sally and you choose to marry Evelyn, just pulling names out of the air here, he knows that if you marry her, you'll have 4 kids, but 2 of them will die in childbirth, and one of them will end up dying later of a car accident, while the last one maybe ends up successful. I mean, he knows what that's going to happen. But there's 2 futures there. Okay? So if he knows the result of each of those, he knows the result of every decision. Say you end up marrying Sally. You have 4 kids. But instead of, say, working for a big steel company and making lots of money to be able to support those 4 kids, you choose to work at McDonald's or Walmart. And you're not making as much money. So suddenly, you're trying to support these 4 kids on that Walmart income. So you end up having to get welfare. He knew that was going to happen. No. He knew it could happen. He knew that if you chose to work at Walmart, that you would end up on welfare. He knew that if you chose to work at the big steel company, you would have lots of money. You'd be able to support all 4 of those kids. And those kids would end up successful because of that choice you made. You see, God knew that if Judas decided to be greedy about the ministry's money and go to the Pharisees to work out a bargain to turn Jesus in, he knew that Judas was going to betray Jesus and then hang himself and go to hell. But he also knew that if Judas decided to change his mind and follow Jesus and preach and do what the other apostles did, sure, Jesus wouldn't have been betrayed by Judas. Somebody else would have done it. Because God knew that that was always a possibility. And he knew exactly what would happen when somebody did. What I'm saying is it didn't have to be Judas. It didn't have to be Peter that cut off the ear of the servant when they were arresting Jesus. It didn't have to be Matthew who went from tax collecting to following Jesus. See, God doesn't just know the future. He knows the futures that our free will can lead us to. And he knows the end of every single one of those paths. And there's an endless number of paths, potential paths that we can choose. But he leaves that choice up to us. That's how free will can work with God knowing the future. He knows the future of all of our free will choices. Every possible future. Don't limit God. Don't put him in a box by saying he knows the future. And don't just say, oh, it's a mystery. It's not something we're supposed to be able to understand. Well, the way I just explained it is how I understand it. If it makes sense to you, great. If it doesn't, fine. Makes sense to me. Yeah. See you on the next one.